The Ravens are finding themselves in a strangely delicate moment of the offseason, one where the noise around the league feels louder than usual, and the conversations seem to stretch far beyond what actually happened on the field. Coming out of the divisional round, the head coaching search has become a topic that is drawing curiosity rather than panic. Because while nothing is spiraling out of control, there is a clear sense that timing and perception matter more now than they might have in other years. Baltimore is not scrambling, but it is also not operating in a vacuum. And that balance has created an interesting backdrop as the postseason continues to unfold, and other teams reveal who they are under pressure. At the same time, watching the rest of the playoff field has made certain truths harder to ignore. Some of the Ravens' weaknesses have become more obvious with every game that passes, not because Baltimore played again, but because of how other contenders have responded to similar situations. When teams are pushed into tight, high-stress moments, their margins show, and the Ravens' margins have been placed under a microscope simply by comparison. It is not always about what Baltimore did wrong in isolation, but how their flaws stack up against teams that managed to survive chaos, turnovers, and momentum swings when it mattered most. One of the clearest examples of how narratives form came from the divisional round matchup, where Buffalo fell in overtime against Denver. The postseason as a whole has been wild, full of unexpected turns, but that particular loss carried weight because of what many believed the AFC landscape had become. With several elite quarterbacks already out of the picture, this felt like Buffalo's cleanest path in years to finally break through. Instead, the game unraveled in ways that were impossible to ignore, starting with multiple turnovers and ending with missed opportunities that would have closed the door before overtime was ever needed. Josh Allen's performance sat at the center of that discussion, and fairly so. Turning the ball over that many times in a playoff game is always going to define the outcome, especially when one of those moments included missing a wide-open target for what would have been the game-winning touchdown. Those plays matter, and no amount of context erases them. Still, the reaction that followed revealed something deeper about how star quarterbacks are discussed, framed, and sometimes protected depending on who they are and what story people want to tell. Nationally, the tone felt noticeably softer. While Allen did receive criticism, there was also a strong undercurrent of sympathy, a sense that the moment was tragic rather than damning. Conversations drifted quickly toward officiating decisions, defensive breakdowns, and the idea that the game itself slipped away from Buffalo rather than being directly given away. That type of framing is not inherently wrong, but it becomes complicated when compared to how other quarterbacks are treated in nearly identical circumstances. This is where Lamar Jackson inevitably enters the conversation, even when he is not the one playing that weekend. Over the years, his postseason performances have been dissected with a level of intensity that often feels personal rather than purely analytical. When Lamar struggles, the language shifts quickly toward blame, toward legacy, toward questions that stretch far beyond a single game. Mistakes that would be framed as shared failures for others often land squarely on his shoulders. Even when the film shows a more complex reality, the contrast has been hard for many to ignore. When Allen took responsibility after the loss, his emotion was met with understanding and even praise. Accountability was framed as leadership. When Lamar does the same, the response has often been harsher, with accountability twisted into an admission of fundamental flaws. That difference is not about denying Lamar's mistakes. He has had rough playoff moments, and anyone being honest about football acknowledges that. The issue is consistency in how those moments are contextualized. Voices around the league have started to call attention to this imbalance more openly. The argument is not that Allen should escape criticism, nor that Lamar should be shielded from it. The argument is that the same standards should apply. When a quarterback plays poorly, say it. When teammates fail him, say that too. When play calling puts a player in a bad position, acknowledge it. Football has never been a one-man sport, especially in the postseason, where one breakdown can erase 3/4 of strong play. Looking back at Lamar's playoff history, context has often been stripped away in favor of a simpler, harsher narrative. Games where he accounted for nearly all of the team's offensive production were reduced to turnover counts, without acknowledging injuries around him or game plans that limited the running backs. Interceptions that came from receivers failing to finish routes or win contested catches were pinned entirely on the throw, as if placement and timing existed in a vacuum. Over time, those moments stacked into a reputation that has been difficult to shake. That reputation grows heavier when similar mistakes by other quarterbacks are framed differently. When Allen throws into traffic, discussions lean toward risk-taking and competitive fire. When Lamar does it, the conversation often jumps to decision-making and composure. Neither quarterback is perfect, and neither should be immune from criticism. But the emotional weight attached to those critiques has not always been equal. This matters for the Ravens because these narratives bleed into how the team itself is evaluated. When Baltimore loses, the focus frequently narrows until it rests almost entirely on the quarterback. Even in games where defensive lapses, dropped passes, or questionable strategy played significant roles, that environment shapes public perception, which in turn influences broader conversations about coaching, roster construction, and organizational direction. As the Ravens look ahead, these dynamics sit quietly in the background of every discussion about leadership and future planning. The head coaching situation may not be chaotic, but it exists within a league that is constantly reacting to storylines as much as results. Understanding where criticism is fair and where it becomes distorted is part of navigating that space. For Baltimore, the challenge is not just correcting weaknesses on the field, but also pushing back against narratives that oversimplify why seasons end the way they do. Watching the rest of the postseason has only reinforced how thin the line is between advancement and elimination. Turnovers swing games, missed assignments change legacies. The difference is often not talent, but how moments are remembered and explained once the clock hits zero. For the Ravens, that reality continues to shape how their present is judged and how their future is debated, setting the stage for even deeper conversations as the offseason unfolds. As those conversations continue to circulate, the Ravens also find themselves having to evaluate how much of the outside noise actually matters when real decisions are being made inside the building. The head coaching situation has been labeled as tricky by some, but not because there is confusion about identity or direction. It is tricky because the league calendar creates pressure points, and other teams moving faster can give the illusion that Baltimore is falling behind. Even when patience has historically served this organization well, the Ravens have rarely been reactive, and that philosophy has not suddenly disappeared, even if the environment around them feels more restless than usual. What complicates things is that postseason results always magnify every perceived flaw. Watching other teams navigate adversity has forced uncomfortable comparisons. When contenders adjust mid-game, when they hide weaknesses or lean into strengths with confidence, it highlights areas where Baltimore still has work to do. That does not mean the roster is broken, but it does underline that the margin for error has shrunk. In January football, weaknesses do not stay hidden for long, and once they are exposed, opponents will attack them relentlessly. One of the recurring issues that has become harder to ignore is how the Ravens handle high-leverage offensive moments. There have been stretches where the offense looks unstoppable, creative, and perfectly tailored to its quarterback. Then there are moments where the approach tightens, the play calling becomes conservative or predictable, and the burden shifts almost entirely onto Lamar Jackson to create something extraordinary. Against elite defenses, that imbalance becomes dangerous, especially when execution around him is not flawless. This is where the quarterback discourse circles back again, because the expectations placed on Lamar often exceed what is realistically sustainable. He is asked to be perfect in moments where protection breaks down or receivers fail to separate, and when he is not, the criticism accelerates. Other quarterbacks are allowed to exist within the messiness of football, where mistakes are shared and context matters. For Lamar, that grace has been harder to come by, and it affects how his performances are remembered long after the games are over. The postseason also exposed how thin the line is between innovation and stubbornness. Teams that advanced were often willing to adapt on the fly, even if it meant abandoning what worked during the regular season. Baltimore has sometimes struggled with that transition, sticking to ideas that defined earlier success but did not necessarily fit the opponent or the moment. That rigidity can be costly when defenses adjust and windows close faster than expected. Defensively, the Ravens have shown they can dominate stretches of games, but the playoffs demand consistency, not flashes. Missed tackles, coverage breakdowns, and lapses in discipline have had outsized impacts when possessions are limited. Against top-tier offenses, a single blown assignment can undo an entire quarter of solid play. Watching other teams survive despite similar issues only sharpens the focus on Baltimore's need to clean up details rather than rely on talent alone. Special teams and situational football have also quietly influenced outcomes. Field position battles, clock management, and execution in late-game scenarios often decide playoff games. Before fans realize it, the Ravens have been excellent in these areas at times, but inconsistency has crept in during critical moments. Those are the margins that separate teams still playing from teams already looking toward the draft and free agency. All of this feeds back into the coaching discussion, not as an indictment, but as an evaluation. The Ravens are not questioning who they are, but they are being forced to ask how flexible they can be when the stakes rise. The league is evolving, and the postseason is increasingly about adaptability under pressure. Coaching staffs that anticipate adjustments rather than react to them tend to last longer in January. Meanwhile, the broader quarterback debate continues to simmer. The idea that criticism should be fair but firm sounds simple, yet it has proven difficult in practice. Lamar Jackson's career has been defined by extremes, from historic highs to heavily scrutinized lows, often without the middle ground afforded to others. That imbalance shapes how every playoff loss is framed. Regardless of the circumstances surrounding it, what gets lost in those conversations is how often Lamar has been the reason Baltimore was even in position to compete. His ability to carry the offense, extend plays, and force defenses into uncomfortable positions is not common. When that brilliance meets postseason resistance, the failures are magnified while the successes fade into the background. Over time, that creates a distorted picture that does not fully reflect reality as the Ravens move deeper into the offseason. These layered narratives will continue to intersect. The coaching situation, the roster questions, and the ongoing evaluation of Lamar Jackson are not separate issues. They are connected by expectations, by how success is defined, and by how failure is explained. Baltimore's challenge is not just improving execution, but reshaping the conversation around accountability so it reflects the complexity of the game, rather than reducing it to a single face. The postseason has once again reminded everyone that football is unforgiving. Championships are not won by avoiding criticism, but by addressing weaknesses honestly and decisively. For the Ravens, that process is underway. Even if it does not look dramatic from the outside, the league will continue to talk. Comparisons will keep being made, and narratives will evolve with every playoff snap played by someone else, keeping the spotlight firmly on Baltimore even while they watch from the sidelines. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support keeps us bringing you the latest news on the Baltimore Ravens. And hey, drop your take in the comments below. We want to hear from the flock. In what could be the most shocking move of the offseason, the Baltimore Ravens have reportedly shaken the NFL to its core with an unexpected acquisition. Justin Jefferson. Sources close to the team suggest that the superstar wide receiver, widely regarded as one of the most explosive offensive threats in the league, could be teaming up with Lamar Jackson, creating a pairing that has defenses across the NFL on high alert. Jefferson's arrival in Baltimore is already stirring speculation about how the Ravens' offensive identity might evolve. Known for his jaw-dropping speed, precise route running, and ability to make contested catches in the most unlikely situations, Jefferson would instantly become the focal point of the Ravens' aerial attack. The combination of Lamar Jackson's improvisational talent and Jefferson's playmaking ability has the potential to redefine what opposing defenses must prepare for on game day. Analysts are already debating whether this move signals a shift in strategy, with Baltimore possibly embracing a more pass-heavy approach to complement Jackson's dynamic running skills. Fans are buzzing with excitement and a hint of disbelief. Jefferson, who has spent his career thrilling audiences with spectacular plays and record-breaking performances, joining a team traditionally known for its ground-and-pound style, seems almost like a cinematic twist. Could this pairing push Baltimore into uncharted territory in the playoffs? The speculation is wild, and social media is alight with mock formations, highlight reels, and debates about how defensive coordinators will adjust. While official comments from the Ravens front office remain scarce, insiders hint that Jefferson's integration could be seamless, given his football IQ and experience thriving under pressure. Questions remain about how the supporting cast will adapt and whether this duo will create the kind of offensive juggernaut that sends shockwaves through the league. One thing is certain: defenses everywhere will be recalculating, and the Ravens suddenly have a new dual threat that could make the NFL landscape unrecognizable next season. The rumor, if true, signals that the Ravens are willing to make bold, headline-grabbing moves, and the football world can only wait and watch as this potential powerhouse duo begins to take shape. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay in the loop with exclusive news on our Baltimore Ravens, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. We'd love to hear what the flock thinks. Drop your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.